you can post on Facebook or Instagram and tell us about what motivates you to do rehab. What really encourages you or what pushes you to do rehab, and post on social media and tag us in it. And we will enter you into a contest to get a free month of therapy. So please do that. Tag us on Facebook, social media, and let us know if you have any questions about that as well. And I'll be watching out for questions in the Facebook live stream as well. So if you guys have questions and you're watching this, please put them in there too. All right, so we can go ahead and get started here. Really excited. And for our first guest, we have Eryn and Mariah. So Eryn and Mariah, I think you guys are muted right now, but welcome to Rehab Power Hour. And so great to have you guys on here. And please introduce yourselves.
Sure.
Hi. Yeah. Go ahead, Mariah.
Well, thank you for having us, first of all. I'm Mariah Morgan. I'm a subdural hematoma survivor and co-host of the Making Headway Podcast.
And I'm Eryn Martin. Mariah and I are good friends and have been good friends for a long time. I recently, almost a year ago now, actually had a spontaneous subarachnoid hemorrhage. And this was about 2 years after Mariah's accident where she had hers. And we both kind of, we made it through our rehab, and maybe it wasn't as physically acute as maybe some others, but we both left it kind of being with a lot of questions. And we were so fortunate to have each other that we were just like, I'm sure other people are looking for a sense of community and people to be with them on their journey too. So we started the Making Headway podcast.
Awesome. Well, really excited to have you guys on here. And I think other people will have questions for you guys as well, as do I. So I'd love to learn more about your podcast and what you guys are doing, and what, kind of why that got started and what your mission is with that. And I think a lot of people here can also really relate to after they've had a stroke, you have so many different questions, right? So many different things going on, and what you guys kind of did during that process and what really helped you. I think a lot of people could benefit from hearing about your story as well. So to get started, maybe before we start talking about the podcast, maybe with Eryn, we can start with you. If you can give us a little bit of insight, into your journey after, since your injury, what you kind of went through, what helped, what didn't help, and what kind of really kept you going.
Yes. So a little insight into my injury to start. I am a nurse by trade, and it was right after our first COVID spike, kind of coming out of that. And I was just kind of getting back into my normal type of nursing job because I had to change for COVID. And I was doing an online workout. So I was fortunate actually to be at home and not out in public. And mid-punch, I was doing kickboxing, so punching is allowed. I had a pop in my head and tremendous pain. It was so low in my head, I thought it was maybe my neck. I had projectile vomiting, just felt awful, and ended up having to call 911. This is where it was so fortunate I was home because my husband was here to help me do that. And they found that I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage. It was spontaneous, and it actually wasn't an aneurysm. So as far as subarachnoid hemorrhages go, I had the best type that you could have, if there is a best. So I didn't get diagnosed with a full-on stroke. I didn't have a lot of the physical. It was more of the cognitive, the mental fatigue, the emotional depression, that brain fog. So punching is allowed. A lot of people are very well familiar with. Yeah. So I was a lot more along those lines. What was really helpful was I reached out to my Brain Injury Association just for my nurse training. I remembered that, hey, there's something in my state, someplace I can call to get help, because I left the hospital without any help. I wasn't set up for any type of services or anything. It was just kind of figure it out. So I called my Brain Injury Association, and they were pretty direct in being like, you need to get a speech therapist. And I'm like, why? I'm talking to you just fine. This doesn't make sense to me. And they were the ones that turned me on to the idea of cognitive therapy and the fact that my thinking is likely not going to be right anymore. And they were totally right. So through, hearing that from them and then working with my primary care doctor and my neurosurgeon, I was able to get into some visiting nurse services first for that and then outpatient. So that was very helpful. What was unhelpful was having to figure out every little step along the way by yourself. Mariah was great having a friend that had been through brain injury to give me that heads up about the emotional aspects. Nobody talks about that. So,
yeah, that's I think the emotional and the mental aspect is something that comes as a part of having a stroke. And going through that journey is a really, really big part of but doesn't really get talked about a lot and is just as important as all the other aspects. So that's a great point. And, that's something that we also have a stroke support group, community that we're working on building with a lot of the same values in mind that you kind of mentioned. And, where people can support one another, encourage one another, because it's a everyday, daily battle, right? So kind of having that support there every day can be helpful as well. And so thank you so much, Eryn, for sharing your story. And hopefully that was something that other people were able to benefit from as well. So Mariah, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as well.
Sure. My brain injury is a very different type than Eryn's, but we did have a lot of overlap in terms of the things that we battled. I was hit by a car in a pedestrian crosswalk on my way to work one morning. I did look both ways. I was not looking at my phone. Sometimes the universe just throws something your way that you don't expect. And so I was in a medically induced coma in the hospital for a few days and came out of it and didn't, other than mostly just feeling like a zombie, the doctors were kind of like, you're a miracle. And then it sent me on my merry way. So I didn't have a whole lot of physical side effects other than general fatigue. I did have a fractured knee, but that's not the brain.
Sure.
But I did feel like I was just totally on my own after that. I had sort of like your standard battery of visiting nurses briefly, and then was kind of left to pick up the pieces or piece the pieces into the puzzle. But I did, you don't research a brain injury before you get a brain injury usually. And so I really didn't know what I was doing. And I in hindsight, I really kind of muddled my way through. And it was really through starting the podcast that I was able to realize, hindsight's 2020, but really what I was going through at the time. And that is kind of how the podcast was born, was the number of conversations that Eryn and I had about how alone we have felt, even though we have each other. And, I didn't have Eryn for a couple of years there, so I wouldn't have asked her to rush her brain injury for me. But, but yeah, it's, you feel isolated, you're trying to figure things out for yourself. There's, it's hard to find support groups, at least I didn't even know they existed until Eryn had hers and she, was able to inform me about a few. So it was just sort of you're in a lot of ways left to your own devices. So yeah.
Well, it's, first of all, it's great to hear that you guys were able to, even though you didn't have necessarily physical impairments, but you were able to recover and make gains and see progress. So that's fantastic. That's great to hear. And now with the podcast, so Making Headway. So tell me a little bit about what you guys talk about. What are your episodes about? What do you guys discuss?
You want to go, Eryn? You want me to take it?
Sure. So we have really, in thinking about what is it that we felt like we needed, one was support. So just hearing other people's stories and their amazing journeys and how, they're able to take something so tragic and life-altering and really turn it into a positive. That's been super inspiring for all of us. And then the other was the education piece, because like Mariah mentioned, you're kind of left to your own devices once you're back at home and kind of out of that acute phase. So there's a lot to sift through and a lot to try to figure out, like what would be a good resource? What should I be thinking about? Where could I go for this problem? So we interview practitioners from all different walks of medicine and therapy and that sort of thing, just to kind of get different perspectives as to what's out there. We don't personally endorse any one thing or another, but it's just nice to have conversations with people about what they do and their angle on recovery. What did I miss, Mariah?
Oh, that was great. I mean, I think really one of the goals is in terms of medical practitioner interviews is making sure, like Eryn said, we don't necessarily endorse people, though we do vet them and make sure they're really legit, but making sure that we're finding a way to connect people with the resources that they feel they need. Obviously, every brain injury is different. Every brain is different. So everybody's going to have a different need at any different stage. So, trying to put as much information out there as we possibly can, because I think we both felt the lack of information and the lack of connection with some of our practitioners.
Yeah, definitely. I think you guys made some great points, and some of the things we've kind of seen as well. And talking about things that are important, like support and education. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we have Rehab Power Up, for exactly that type of purpose, and just providing a means for more education and more awareness and support. And I think another area of support that a lot of people sometimes forget about, or maybe just not talked about as often, are caregivers, right? Our loved ones, huge part of support. So, just thank you to all the caregivers out there right now that are watching Rehab Power Hour and helping their loved ones through recovery. So, okay. So with Making Headway, with this podcast, so, I think you mentioned some pretty interesting things, and I know a lot of people listening would probably be interested in that. I think everyone is genuinely looking to get more information, looking to learn more. How can they listen to your podcast? How do they find you guys?
We're available on all major podcast platforms. So iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon, pretty much anywhere you name it, we're there. But if you are not a regular podcast listener and are looking for a way to find us, our website is makingheadwaypodcast.com. And we have all of the websites there. There's some pretty amazing ones. The most recent one, I think, blew both of our minds, no pun intended. It's with a neuro-optometrist, like a field we just did not know much about, but vision in the brain is something that gets neglected a little bit. So super informative and really, really interesting. But yeah, they're all there. And you can also follow us on Instagram. We try and keep reminders about the new episodes. They're live every Monday morning, but we try and remind people there as well. So.
All right, awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure to, if you guys are interested in the live stream or in the Zoom chat, let us know and just say that you're interested, and we'll look to get you guys the information about their podcast so you guys can listen and learn more and just see what other information is out there. So we'll definitely work on spreading that as well. With Making Headway, what was the most surprising part? What, once you've been talking to, you talk to so many different people, meet so many different people, have so many different topics, what was the most surprising part?
I feel like we're going to have different answers.
Yeah, there's been a lot. I mean, we've talked to some of the functional medicine practitioners are super interesting. Some of the side effects, like the fatigue and just that brain fog, I just was kind of ready to accept, I think. I was told, go home, rest, it'll be better. You'll feel better in a few months. No problem. So I kind of took it at face value. And then with talking with all these different practitioners, and like Mariah mentioned, the neuro-optometrist, I realized there's so much more to it than that. And there's probably something you can do. So that for me has been really, really helpful in my recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we've had a couple interviews, especially recently, that have been a really good reminder of the respect the human body deserves. It's an amazing thing. Our most recent one with the neuro-optometrist, and then the practitioner interview we had before that was with a neuroendocrinologist. Mm-hmm. And, we going about our day-to-day life often forget how much the brain is responsible for, even as brain injury survivors. Like we might be more aware of it than most, but like the neuroendocrinology piece, like the connection between the brain and your hormone function, whether you're a man or a woman, is pretty incredible what it does for the body. And the same goes for the eye. I mean, I think in the first like 4 minutes of our most recent episode, Dr. Thies, who we spoke to about neurooptometry, runs you through how the body perceives something with the eye and then sends signals to the brain and then, like to the rest of the body. And having someone walk you through that process really makes you stop and think about everything in your day that you take for granted. So that has been pretty amazing. There have been some others that have been pretty remarkable. I think in terms of survivor stories, we have spoken to so many people who are truly inspirations, who have gone through so much trauma and made so many positive things out of it. And that's always something we appreciate as well, which is really the point of the podcast, is let's turn this thing on its head, pun intended, and make it something positive.
Yeah, that's really awesome. It seems like the common theme there is also science, right? Just becoming more aware about the science, learning about the science from an expert who's also able to communicate it in a way that you can understand, right? Which is really, really important, because if you can understand that, you can start thinking of ways to build on top of that, or how can I actually incorporate this into my daily life or into my rehab. So that's really, really important. And when you're talking about the visual component, biofeedback is something that just came to my mind, right? That's so important in therapy, right? Being able to have, qualify if something that you're trying to do, a movement that you're trying to do, if you're doing a good job of it or not, and getting that feedback of, I'm trying to move and I'm seeing myself move, and you're getting a positive feedback or negative feedback on whether or not you're doing a good job is crucial. And all the more reason why it's so important to engage in rehab as well. Making sure when it's not just passive, but you're focused, mentally engaged is super important as well. And so, yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'll also check look in the live chat here to see if we have any questions for you guys as well. So give me just a second. And while I'm looking at that, do you, what about, physical rehab, right? When it comes to physical rehab and hours of therapy and putting in the repetitions, have you guys had any experience with that, or talked to any practitioners about how important that is?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could hear that, but my office is right on the water and there are boats honking for some reason. So. Do you want to go, Eryn? You want me to take it?
Yeah, we have had, we have an episode that'll be airing for Stroke Awareness Month in May from a physical therapist, talking about how, to really build, like, to get that neuroplasticity and to build yourself back up after a stroke. It takes a lot. We've recently talked with you guys at Motus Nova as well. And you can look forward to that coming out for Stroke Awareness Month as well. And just how much it takes to rebuild that. You really need to be dedicated to your journey to see the results.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's also one of those things that I think everyone knows, right? But it's a thing that you have to commit yourself to as well every day. That's a big part of it. But yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing as well. And it was great hearing from you. We'll make sure to get the information about your podcast post as well. So hopefully people that are interested can have another resource as well to get more information. And do you guys have any questions for me? Anything about Motus or about stroke or about Rehab Power Hour? Any questions that you guys have?
I can't think of any. We interviewed both David Wu and Dr. Housley on Sunday. So we're fresh off of a whole lot of Motus Nova information. But I mean, thank you for all that you're doing for this community. It is amazing. And we look forward to seeing where the technology takes you guys.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And for everyone else, if this is something you guys like listening to, having other guests on, listening to podcasts, if that's something you guys are interested in, please let us know, right? If that's something you want to, that's useful, that's helpful, having access to more information, please let us know, comment in the live chat, and let us know that, we like listening to guests. We like hearing from other people in the stroke community and telling their stories and things like that.